Hey, welcome back, everyone. We're here at the Flourish Podcast, Season 2. My name is Devin Abalon.
And my name is Michelle Holmes. This is our official start to Season 2, so we are really excited today. We are going to talk about burnout and specifically what are the symptoms of burnout. The reason I like to include this as our season opener is because it's really important to understand where we're starting from if we are actually experiencing burnout. But lately, burnout has become a bit of a hot topic. So there's a lot of discussion about it. And sometimes the discussion isn't really at the heart of what one really experiences when they're actually burnt out. I'm thinking of the conversations that people have when they're saying, "Oh, I had a really tough week. I'm going to take a half day on Friday and I'm going to come back to work on Monday and I'm going to feel great." That is not true burnout. It takes time. It's more serious than a rough week. And so I think that this is a really good starting place for us to begin Season 2 because we have a jam-packed season ahead of us. Isn't that right, Devin?
Yes, we do. Long list.
A long list, some really awesome episodes in store for you. And so today's episode is going to give you a starting point of understanding if you are experiencing burnout, what does that actually mean? And then in future episodes, we will follow up with some actual specific actions to take. So I think this is a pretty good foundational starting point.
Yeah. And the starting point being, how do we identify what is burnout? What are those symptoms? We're not going to solve this today. If we started talking about all the symptoms and what we need to do to attack it, there are entire podcasts based on this. And we'd probably be talking for 6 straight hours. And then all the listeners would get burnt out. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
Starting things off with a bang.
Yes. So I have an official definition of what burnout is, and I wanted to include this along with a couple of stats here. So burnout is the state of emotional, mental, and physical exhaustion caused by prolonged and excessive stress, typically related to work or caregiving responsibilities. Okay. And I really like this definition here because I personally have experienced burnout related to my work many years ago. So job specific burnout. And I have also experienced parenting burnout. So more along the lines of those caregiving responsibilities. So I like that this definition includes both of them. And I think when it comes to the symptoms that we're going to talk about, that they apply to both types here. But when we think about burnout and the conversations that we're having specific to high performers experiencing burnout, a lot of times that comes down to the work-related stress.
Yeah.
So I did some research for us, and there are some very interesting stats. So what I found is 75% of workers have experienced burnout. That's a lot. Yeah. 84% of millennials have experienced burnout in their current position. Over half of the women in leadership experience burnout on a consistent basis. And I think that's kind of what is so concerning recently, is that this is something that is very consistent for people. And then lastly, 57% of employers, So coming from the employer standpoint, these managers and HR people, they believe that burnout directly affects their employees' retention and turnover rates. So this is a big deal when it comes to work, especially in the world that we kind of live in high performance. And so, Devin, I would love for you to take it away for us and talk about what to look for.
Sure. And I think, when you talk about those statistics and about how there's increased awareness and just a focus on burnout, I think there may be a tendency to think that, well, maybe it's just, it's particularly when you read that statistic about millennials, and we've talked about millennials in the past and kind of the mindset. And I think it really is telling of just a heightened sense of awareness. These are not, for many, these are not new things. This is not a new phenomenon. But I think people do have a heightened awareness to it. And by having that awareness, it allows people to become better performers by being able to address those concerns. So what are some of the symptoms? I think if you look at the symptoms of burnout, you can really break it down into sort of 4 different categories, if you will. And I like to think of it in terms of the physical symptoms, the emotional symptoms, the performance symptoms, and the spiritual symptoms. And you can think through, as we start discussing these, how are we talking about things? Are there things in your life that you can say that really resonate and say, wow, that's something that I deal with every day? And so let's just kind of knock through these. And the first off, we'll talk about physical symptoms, and kind of this idea that this chronic fatigue, this exhaustion of just always feeling run down, always feeling tired. And I think it's kind of, there are 2 sides to this, and they kind of feed off of each other. And the first one is, you think about not taking care of your body, not getting enough sleep, not eating properly, not exercising. Sometimes, you're not doing those things because the workload is too much. You're dealing with projects, you're working on things that are forcing you to reprioritize, what you're doing in your day. If you're working late at the office or spending so much time and energy focusing on a particular project, you don't have time to go to the gym. If you're working through lunch, you don't have time to eat properly. And so that kind of feeds off itself in a point where the work itself, that workload is keeping you from the prioritization of your well-being. But then it also goes the other way around, right? In terms of in the fact that stress directly impacts your body, your well-being. And we've seen the studies, right? We've seen the studies that stress can lead to things like high blood pressure, to diabetes, to muscle tension, and give you that feeling that you're feeling run down. It also weakens your immune system, to a point where now you're more susceptible to getting ill. And so what we see in folks who are experiencing burnout is just this kind of chronic rundown feeling where you don't have that energy to move forward physically, and you're always getting sick. And so one of the things I think through is ask yourself, and it's something you can check with yourself. Are you always tired? Do you feel like you're just not yourself because you kind of let yourself go, and you're always getting sick, or there's a cough or something you just can't get over? And those are some of the things I think of when I think of, the physical symptoms of burnout and the impact it has on your body and your overall well-being.
Yeah, that's a great, just a great, I guess, recap of some of the different physical symptoms that people have. I know for myself personally, I knew that I was experiencing burnout on a consistent basis when I would come home from work, and it was like I didn't have energy for anything else of enjoyment. It was basically survival. So I think that's also a good baseline for people to kind of check in with themselves, because you had said this chronic exhaustion, and I can certainly identify times in my life where I had that and spent basically a year and a half being sick very consistently, was not able to have full vitality and flourish. So yeah, great intro for the physical symptoms. What about the emotional symptoms.
Yeah. And I think, all of this is interrelated, right? But when I think of the emotional symptoms, I think of sort of just where are you at? What is your mindset? Are you excited to be at work, or are you excited to be doing the task at hand, whether it be at work or at home? And I think just generally, there's an indifference, there's this apathy towards what you're doing. There's sort of this lack of motivation. This idea that you don't have that level of enthusiasm, that passion, that excitement that perhaps drove you or put you in the position where you are today. And I think about people who have gotten to a point within their careers or in their home life where they got there because they really wanted to make a difference, or they really wanted to they were trying to do something that just really kind of put a fire under them. And when I think of what happens when you burn out is you lose that, right? You burned out. How can I? You don't have that fire anymore. You're burnt out. Mm-hmm. And so you get sort of this, that motivation's gone, the joy that work brought you in the past. You're just not feeling that joy. And again, it kind of, you don't have that motivation. Then this also leads to, not only is that stress a burden on you, but then there's the anxiety. You're basically your body's reaction to that stress, how you're reacting. And I think about kind of this ever-present, this persistent dread that doesn't go away, this mindset. And it really kind of wreaks havoc with your ability to focus, your ability to get your work done efficiently, effectively. And more importantly, I think most importantly, your ability to really enjoy what you're doing. So work becomes sort of a drag. It becomes something that you're doing, you're kind of going through the motions, but you're not really giving it that passionate effort, perhaps that you were giving it in the past. And so I think of, kind of a check for yourself is the work that you're doing right now, bringing you joy? Are you excited about waking up every morning and getting work done? Or are you like watching the clock or just kind of waiting time out? Because I've seen people, we saw it a lot during the pandemic, as particularly where we saw people who were just kind of, punching the clock. No one actually punches a clock anymore, but I'm showing my age. But kind of going through the motions. And so are you kind of finding yourself in that position where you're just not, you're not getting anything out of it on an emotional level?
And the Sunday scaries.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a big
one. The Sunday dread.
Yeah. If your week is so overwhelming to you that Sunday night you are in a panic, then that's indicating some things need to change.
Yeah, definitely. So that's, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, okay, great. So one of the other categories you mentioned was performance.
Yeah. And so again, they're all, as I mentioned before, they're all interrelated, but you think about what happens when you're burned out, from a physical standpoint, you're run down. From an emotional standpoint, you just don't have that enthusiasm, that passion, that joy. And that leads to, this other symptoms is performance. You're going to see a degradation in your overall performance, what you're getting done, what you're not getting done really. And because when you're burned out, your performance suffers. You're tired, so you don't have that energy. You're indifferent. And so what ends up happening is you find yourself missing deadlines. You're sort of just mailing it in because you don't have that kind of that go-to mindset. And so you're missing deadlines. You're not getting your tasks done. And then one I've seen, and I've experienced this myself, is procrastination. Is you have this dread of a task that in your mind, you don't want to do it because your heart's not in it. And so you put it off and you put it off and you put it off. And that leads to missing the deadlines because you're not getting your work done. And so, if you let's kind of flip things around. If you weren't burnt out, if you were like coming to work or address, facing a task head on, you're excited, you want to get stuff done. And I think we've all experienced kind of that kind of joy, that euphoria, that dopamine, that injection we get when we're able to check things off of our to-do list. And if you're burnt out, then you're not motivated to do that. So you're not checking things off your to-do list. So kind of, again, a check for yourself is ask yourself, are you making your deadlines? Are you getting the tasks done? Are you finishing things on your to-do list? And can you really, at the end of the day, here's a good check. At the end of the day, are you happy with, are you proud of the work that you've done at the end of the day? Or do you end the day and say, what did I do today? Well, I did some emails and I, was online and I did stuff and I went to 6 meetings, but did I really get anything done? And so, we all have a discrete amount of hours in our day to get stuff done. We have to prioritize what we want to do. Are we making the most of that time that we've allotted, that time that we've set aside to do the work that we're being called to do? And so if we're not, then that could be a symptom of burnout as well.
Absolutely. And we know the studies and the surveys have indicated that people who are burnt out do have lower performance. Like, companies know this, human resources know this. And I even think about the episode 8 that we did in season 1 on quiet quitting.
Yeah.
And that was one of the reasons that we're seeing an uptick in, like, exactly what you said, mailing it in, right?
Yeah.
We're just sending it in. We're doing the bare minimum. We don't have that fire under us anymore like we did. And so our performance certainly decreases.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. And then lastly, our last category is spiritual symptoms.
Yeah.
And what I like to think for the spiritual aspect is, this is something that I don't think people talk about quite as much, but is very influential in how we feel and how we are managing and coping within our own lives, is that spiritual connection, both to ourselves and to others, and to, if you have a religion or a spiritual actual relationship here. But that disconnection can be a really big one for people when they start feeling disconnected from themselves, because they are experiencing all the symptoms, or a vast majority of the symptoms that you mentioned, right? They are chronically tired. They are not doing their best. And that's affecting them. That's affecting their psyche and how they feel about themselves, how they feel about the work that they're doing. Even within the organization, this is something we've talked about in the past, but if we have an organization that is understaffed, where the demands on their existing staff have increased for there's all these different reasons that the demands could increase, the workload could increase, and they need to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And for a lot of organizations, there's no light at the end of the tunnel. There's no communication. And so I think that kind of wraps into this perspective from the employee of, well, what am I working towards? And what is the greater purpose with this? Even the mission of the company. What is the mission? Am I aligned with those values? And if we feel like we constantly have demands on us that we cannot meet with our energy levels, with our performance, then we are going to internalize that. And that can also be kind of this way that burnout affects our spiritual relationship. And I also said relationship with others, because it's not just ourself, but when we are unable to connect with our emotions, we also might be unable to connect with the emotions of other people. And so we think about the team and just the relationship that we have with others in our life. We start to see people losing their cool. And we start to see people really not getting along in the team, people not feeling valued. Stress kind of is at this all-time high. And so I think that that goes into it as well, because when we are experiencing burnout, our social engagement system is, when we're not firing on all cylinders, that comes offline when we are in survival mode.
Sure.
So we want to be able to socially engage and keep our cool. So go ahead, Devin.
Well, I think it's all of this is tied together, right? Because when you talk about the social connections, it takes a level of energy, emotional, it takes energy in general for you to engage with other people and to connect. And so when you're run down, when you're feeling unmotivated, you may not have, you just may not have it in you to muster that energy to make those connections. So it's easier to just say, no, I'm tired. I don't want to, I don't want to hang out. I don't want to go out. I'm just going to go home, go to sleep, or work more, do things. So I think that's, that's great. And that's really another indicator that you could be in that position.
Absolutely. And like we said at the beginning, the first step is truly understanding where we're at, because we wanted to, with this episode, decipher between what's real burnout and then what's just the language that people use today of, oh, I'm feeling burnt out, when that's not true, and kind of waters down what the real experience of burnout is. Because this isn't fun to be burnt out. I have not met a single person over the years who said, I really enjoy experiencing burnout. This is a good place for me to be. Our whole podcast is built off of more than just survival mode. We want to encourage people and invite them to flourish in their own way, in their own time. And so in future episodes, we are absolutely going to discuss some of the action steps to take to work our way out of here.
Yeah, very much looking forward to that.
Me too.
Okay. So we've had a great discussion on burnout in general, but really focused on what are the symptoms of burnout? How can you identify whether or not you're really experiencing this? And then in future episodes, we're going to tackle some of the things of how we deal with that and how we can really, truly flourish.
Absolutely. Yes.
All right.
So we'd love to know from you, are you experiencing burnout? And if so, what kind of symptoms keep cropping up for you? Of course, you don't have to have all of these symptoms to be kind of pegged as going through burnout, but I think this is a really great starting point for some of the things that people can begin to look out for in their own lives.
Yeah. All right.
Great. Okay. Well, we will catch you in the next one.
All right. See ya. Thanks, Michelle.
Bye.